All right, good evening, everyone. We are now streaming live on Facebook. So welcome to A Scottish Orb and the world's most awarded single malt distillery. We are live tonight with Glenfiddich and Hendricks. Eric and Alan are going to be taking us around Scotland for a little virtual tour. They're going to have a little cocktail demo, a little tasting. We're so excited that these guys could join us tonight. We had a couple of questions actually before the event even started, wondering, why are you having a gin and a Scotch present together? So before we get started, I want to let everybody know Glenfiddich and Hendricks are actually both part of the William Grant and Sons group. And so this is like kind of the parent brand for a lot of your favorite brands. So Glenfiddich, Hendricks, Sailor Jerry, Tullamore Dew, those are just a few of the brands that are represented by William Grant and Sons. So that's why these guys are going together. They're kind of brother brands. So thank you to everybody who has RSVP'd for your great questions in advance, for the great questions I'm sure you're going to have tonight. I'm just going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to have Eric take us away with Hendricks. So tonight on the line, we have Eric Anderson. He's going to kick off our program by talking to us a bit about Hendricks Gin. We have Alan from Glenfiddich. He's going to take us on a little virtual tour around the Glenfiddich distillery. Very exciting. We have Patrick and Christopher who work with these guys. So if you have any questions, they can help answer. You have Mark Roy, who those of you who have been to some of our other events, you know him well at this point. He's our spirits marketing specialist. He is here for any of your questions about product availability, which store you can find which product at, pricing, etc. And I'm here to moderate all of your questions. So I'll be checking in on Facebook, looking for comments and questions, and then right here in the Zoom webinar. So some people are watching via Zoom who pre-registered. So thank you to those people, to everybody who pre-registered, and everybody watching on Facebook as well. We welcome you to pre-register for future events so you can get coupons, and we're doing some giveaways as well. So, all right, that's enough for me. Eric, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and thank you everyone for tuning in this late afternoon. My name is Eric Anderson, ambassador to Hendricks Gin here on the east coast of the country. I'm dialing in now from Brooklyn, New York. I'm originally from Sweden, so there's gonna be an accent during the next 30 minutes of the presentation. I'm delighted to bring a little bit of a teaser. Not many people have seen what I am about to show you today. We have a brand new video from our distillery. We're going to talk about Hendricks Gin in general, and also about our new variation that has come out over the last few years. So sit back, enjoy, and I'm going to share a little distillery video with you right now. And I hope you will enjoy it.
Today I depart for Scotland, where I will be meeting Hendricks Gin Global Ambassador and amateur cucumber botherer, Mr. Ali Martin. I will be going where few have gone before. Wish me luck as we embark on a wondrous adventure to the Hendricks Gin Palace. There it is!
Welcome to the curious world of Hendricks Gin. Did you just jump out of a hot air balloon?
I certainly did.
Wow.
Hendricks Gin tastes like no other gin because no other gin is made quite like it. Every drop of this precious liquid comes from its beloved distillery on the South Ayrshire coast.
Now let me introduce you to the creator of Hendricks Gin. Botanical obsessive, alchemist, and liquid poet, Miss Leslie Gracie. Her watchful eye ensures the perfection of our precious gin. She leads a vast force of elite workers who craft Hendricks Gin 500 lovely litres at a time.
Vast? There's only 3 of them.
Actually there's 4.
I've heard that Hendricks Gin's exquisite taste comes from a symphony of botanicals gathered from all 6 corners of this glorious, nonsensical planet. So, do you mind telling me exactly what they are?
Are you listening? Good.
Yarrow, coriander, orange, angelica, orris root, lemon peel, cuba berries, caraway seeds, chamomile, elderflower, and juniper.
And of course you can't have gin without stills.
And what a set of stills you have here. Let's just take a moment to marvel at these beauties.
Hendrick's gin is created inefficiently, using not one, but two utterly dissimilar types of still. Here, we have the leader of this ensemble, an exceedingly rare Carterhead still. And this is a rather experienced Bennett still from 1860. The Carterhead steams its botanicals atop its lofty neck, resulting in a lighter, more delicate spirit. The Bennett steeps its botanicals, yielding a rich and complex spirit.
The distillates from these wondrous contraptions are then married, yielding a gin which is simultaneously light, fresh, and intricate.
Fascinating.
Precise measurements are to remain a secret, of course.
Ah, the curious taste of Hendrick's gin at last.
No. It is not yet Hendrick's.
Our liquid is then consummated with the heavenly coup de grace of Bulgarian rose and Cucumis sativus. That is, cucumber. Now that is Hendrick's.
Time for a quick photograph before we leave?
Absolutely.
Great. What I've discovered is that the creation of Hendrick's gin is an elaborate, gloriously inefficient process. All squeeze in, please, and say cheers! Cheers! But it's the peculiar production of Hendrick's gin that makes it taste so astonishingly delectable. Ah, there we are.
Hendrick's gin, oddly infused with rose and cucumber.
There we are, and that is a little intro to our new Hendrick's Gin distillery. So, as many of you know, Hendrick's Gin was created in 1999 by the very Miss Leslie Gracie, who you saw in the video. She's been working with us now for over 35 years, making Hendrick's Gin and a bunch of other great things. So what we're going to talk about today is a little bit more in detail what Hendrick's is and how it works in different cocktails. We're going to look at the new variations of Hendrick's Gin that has come out recently, and also a little peek into the future of what our brand is and will be. And as always, you may pop any questions out in the chat group in the chat, and I will keep an eye on it a little bit, and Caroline will definitely keep an eye on it, so make sure that we're all looking at it. So, as Ali Martin, my dear colleague and global ambassador to Hendrick's, was explaining in the video, Hendrick's Gin is made from a distillate of two different stills. So we have on one hand a Carterhead still, and on the other hand, which is a Bennett still. And those two are very different in style. One creates that light, floral, and fragrant distillate, and the other one creates that rich, pungent, and a little bit more intense distillate. And these are then combined and then infused with roses. And yes, you heard right, there's cucumbers in the gin. If you have ordered a Hendrick's Gin and Tonic, Hendrick's Gin and Soda in a bar, and you got it with cucumber, that is absolutely correct, because there's cucumber already in the gin, and it matches much better than the lime. So that's a little recommendation for you. We're gonna mix a little cocktail later on, but let me talk just a little bit more about what the gin is. We have our 11 botanicals, and we distill these in small batches of just around 500 liters per batch. And what that allows Leslie to do is to have a much better control over the distillate and create exactly the same gin every single time she distills it. So it's consistent, but it's also much better for precision when you make the gin. So the small stills are really key in keeping our gin as fantabulous as it is. And you might think that the black bottle is a little bit rare, a little bit unique. Not many gins are in black bottles, and certainly not when we created Hendrick's over 20 years ago. But this is a little homage, a little tribute to the Victorian era in Britain, when gin was having its heyday over there. And we want to celebrate the second heyday of gin here now. So this is a little tribute to the past, but also a tribute to bartenders now these days, who are very much making the world of Hendrick's come alive through all these wonderful cocktails. Because think of it, gin is really the only spirit that we don't typically drink straight, unless you are a gin ambassador, of course. But we typically mix the gin with, tonic water, mix it in martini, and a bunch of other cocktails. So you need to have a few bar tools and a few other cocktail ingredients when you work with the gin, right? All right, so we've looked at the Hendrick's Original. I'm gonna take it over to our next gin, which was a seasonal variant that we created only a couple of years ago. And that one is called Hendrick's Midsummer Solstice. And it's a little bit bright here, but the bottle is truly pink in color, see-through there. So the Hendrick's Midsummer Solstice is made in the similar way as the original Hendrick's gin, but it is infused with additional floral essences. So you know that Hendrick's Original is infused with roses, but the Midsummer Solstice is infused with several other flowers as well that are blooming during midsummer. So the reason why we created this gin was we didn't really plan this out really well. Our former global ambassador, Duncan, he got married in Scotland about 4 years ago, and Leslie and him, they were very close friends. So Leslie said, I'm gonna make you a gin for your wedding. I'm gonna make about 6 bottles so you can have fun, make some drinks, and that's it. And I'm going to get the inspiration, or ginspiration if you wish, in the gin from your wife's wedding bouquet. Said and done, she created 6 bottles of gin infused with these additional floral essences, and they had them. And during that night, somebody had the idea that we should actually make this gin available for a larger audience. So it became Midsummer Solstice, and it is still available in the state. It is a limited edition, and it is actually not coming back. So what you see in the stores is what you get. So if you're interested in these products, they're going to be quite rare in a few months. So you better pick up 1 or 2 of these if you can find them still.
So Eric, I just posted the product inventory in the chat here on Zoom. I will post that to Facebook as well for anybody who's interested. And we do have a question. Somebody is wondering, the inspiration for this gin came from the bridal bouquet. What flowers were in that?
Well, so Leslie will not fully disclose which flowers there were, but I'm sure that Google, in its almightiness, might have captured a picture from the wedding at some point. His name was Duncan McRae. I honestly do not know myself exactly which flowers they are, but they are the flowers that are the significant flowers in the south of Scotland that are in bloom during midsummer. So that's a hint for you, and there's more than one flower. That's all we can say. But it's a great question. We are going to disclose a little bit more of the ingredients, a bit more precise, with our next gin, which is called Hendrick's Orbium. And this is a gin that is a little bit of a personal connection for myself. It's probably my favorite gin in our family of gins now. We created this about 4 years ago now. It is Hendrick's Gin Original again, that is infused with wormwood, lotus blossom, and cinchona bark. So what does that even mean? Well, Hendrick's gin is a well-rounded gin that is great and really well balanced for cocktails. But what we did with Orbium is that we infused it with these 3 additional infusions: the wormwood, lotus blossom, and cinchona bark, to give it a little bit more of an oomph. So the wormwood gives it some intense earthy notes. The quinine gives it a little hint of bitterness, but also much more complexity. And then we have the lotus blossom, which just overflows it with more floral essences. So it's a little bit of a bigger gin, and it is a favorite of mine to put in a martini. And there are a lot of different martinis out there. Dale DeGroff and I, who is more referred to as King of Cocktails, we're actually doing a seminar called The Evolution of the Martini. And we're using Orbium for that seminar exclusively. So for me, this is a martini gin, but also a little tribute to bartenders out there who are really interested in that little bit extra in the flavor. So I'm going to make a Martinez cocktail for you here. And I am going to post the recipe for everyone here in the chat. So it's easy for you to copy and paste into some Word file that you have. It's great. It's a great drink. And let me just read a couple of sentences. This is a book that came out a couple of decades ago. It's called The Martini, written by Sir Barnaby Conrad III. And it is known to be probably the best book about the martini during that time, at least. And the Martinez cocktail was created in 1887. So it is sort of the ancestor of gin, of the martini. It's not really quite the martini that we know today, you know, gin and dry vermouth, but it has a lot of other ingredients in it as well. So the 1887 is the recipe from, and the recipe reads like this: use small bar glass, 1 dash of bitters, 2 dashes of maraschino, 1 wine glass of vermouth, 2 lumps of ice. We can add a bit more ice, and 1 pony of gin. And they were not using Hendrick's gin in 1887. Let me be clear with that one. But Hendrick's Orbium works wonders in this recipe. And they were shaking the martini at that time. And this is a little bit of a controversy for bartenders these days. We want to stir our martinis to allow for a little bit more precise dilution. So let me just add a little bit more ice in my mixing glass. And we are going to pour 1.5 ounces of the Hendrick's Orbium in here. And if you're mixing along with me, make sure you have a cocktail glass or 2 chilling already, so we're ready to strain it into there. So we're
Eric,
not.
Question
Yep.
for me: where do I get a pourer like that?
I know someone.
That is so cool.
We have a little elephant pourer on this one. I have a penguin here. We
That's
have
awesome.
a few nice ones. Let me.
All right, sorry for interrupting.
Not at all. So we're looking at it. The proportion is a 2-to-1 with the vermouth and the gin. So the proportion of this cocktail has varied over the years, but this is the one that we feel that when Hendrick's gin or when Hendrick's Orbium comes out really well in the mix. We had the maraschino liqueur. I put about 1/4 ounce of it. I would just go a little bit shy of 1/4 ounce, maybe a large bar spoon. Maraschino liqueur is really quite pungent. This one is from Luxardo, but it packs a punch. So be a little bit mindful of that. And Angostura bitters, about a dash in there. You stir this one well. You get your glass that is chilling out over here. And when you stir a cocktail, depending on how much ice and how cold the ice is from the beginning, you want to stir it down so you add at least 20% more liquid to the drink. If your ice is super cold, You might even stir longer than 30 seconds. If your ice is a bit watery, like mine is right now, you stir for a bit less, okay? So it's all about, you want to control temperature and dilution in here. Finally, we're garnishing it with just a little twist of orange. We pour it in there. So that is the Martinez cocktail, which is the ancestor of the martini, made with Hendrick's Orbium. I'm going to take a sip of this.
So Mark, we've got a couple of people wanting to know which stores they can find the Orbium at. I did paste the link for people to view the inventory, but it looks like a couple of their local stores were sold out. Do you know if we're getting any more?
Yeah, actually, it's a fully distributed item, so it's carried in almost all of our locations, with the exception of a couple of our small ones, smaller locations. But yeah, it's a Category 1 item carried in all our stores. It's currently retailing at $39.99. So like you posted in the chat, just go to liquorandwineoutlets.com and punch in Hendrick's, and they'll bring it up, and you click on it, and they'll tell you exactly which stores have how many bottles.
Great, thank you, Mark. And I know Mark just gave you the price right now, but for those of you who pre-registered, you also received a coupon that is valid on this product. So take advantage, give it a try. It's a great time to buy it when you can get a little money off to see how much you're going to like it. All
Great
right.
idea. Thank you very much, Mark, for that. And Carla, of course, that's awesome. What I would like to, do we have any more questions there? I'm going to talk a little bit more about Orbium and how it works in classic cocktails. But let me first throw in a couple of links in the chat here, hendricksgin.com. And if you're looking for specific recipes of cocktails, I can recommend the diffordsguide.com. And if there are cocktails that you have heard of, you're not really sure about the specs and the recipes, Difford's Guide has, I think, over 5,000 recipes right now. So it's a great source of information. And for all of you, if there are any more really nerdy bartenders like myself who wants to research on their own, there is a fantastic website that has scanned all the vintage cocktail books. Basically, the one that the Martinez was originally cited in, but a bunch as well. And that's also in the chat here, EUVS vintage cocktail books. CLV.bz. So that's a great source of information as well, or inspiration, if you wish.
So Eric, I know you just gave everybody a few sources for some cocktails, but one of our viewers would like to know, I don't like gin and tonic. What is another great mixer that I can try? I love citrus.
Excellent. That's a great question. And sometimes when we've had a liquor and we don't quite like that mix. Now we're in a situation where we have different types of tonics, but if we want to go completely away from tonic, I would recommend for Hendrick's gin, for the original, an elderflower Collins. It's really, really nice. With fresh lemon juice, a bit of elderflower liqueur. If you can find the elderflower cordial, that also works. Hendrick's Gin, club soda. It's really, really easy to make, very straightforward, and that's a really good one. I personally like Hendrick's Gin and club soda because it is just very, very neutral, very, refreshing. It's a summer drink, and I know I spent a lot of time in Japan, and they do Hendrick's Sonics, which is half soda, half tonic. So if you want to reduce that tonic flavor a little bit, you can do a split with a soda and club soda and tonic. Works as well, really well. I wanted to show you this one because, excellent. Here we go, Mark. We're working to get more stock in. Excellent, thank you. And what is good to know about Hendrick's Orbium is that it is a permanent bottle extension from Hendrick's Gin. So it's not going to go away. Unfortunately, Midsummer Solstice is, but I can show you a little teaser of what it is going to be replaced by. and that is called the Hendrick's Lunar. And that's coming out early next year. We only have about, I don't know, 1 or 2 cases in the country right now. But this is the gin that is replacing Midsummer Solstice next year. And it is an amazing gin. The unique things about Lunar is that it is infused again with floral essences, but only flowers that are blooming during the nighttime. So as you know, if you are in a beautiful garden, the garden smells different in the day and in the night. And what we've done is we've taken flowers and taken the essence of these flowers and infused them into the gin. And those are flowers that bloom only during nighttime. So we will have lunar hours where we have a little happy hour with Hendrick's Lunar coming up. And it's coming in the first quarter of next year. I don't have the exact arrival date yet. It's a very interesting gin. It's maybe one of my favorite in the Hendrick's family already. I'm a little bit partial to Orbium still, but this one is super cool. It has a little bit of spiciness as well. And yes, it was launched in the UK earlier this year. So a couple of countries already had it. But David, that's really good to see that you have tried it before.
David, I love that you're tuning in from England right now. That makes me so happy that we have people on the line from all over the world.
And we have another question about Amazonia. About 6 years ago, we launched an expedition. About 7 years ago, we launched an expedition into the rainforest in South America, and we found a very particular botanical called the scorpion tail. But during that expedition, where we sent Leslie Gracie, by the way, into the jungle, she discovered some wonderful flavors, some wonderful tropical flavors, and we decided to make a gin inspired by that trip. The Hendrick's Amazonia is currently only available in global travel retail, which seems to be a smaller shopping space than they planned, 2 years ago. But we are going to have it available, but not only in a few years from now, unfortunately. But it will come in. And if you're traveling overseas or in some domestic airports as well, you can find Hendrick's Amazonia. It's quite rare, so if you see it, I'll recommend you to get your hands on it. It's super cool. It's quite tropical, but still gin.
Very cool. All right, if there aren't any more questions for Eric, I think it's time for us to make our way to another part of Scotland and get our passports stamped with Glenfiddich. So just before I kick things over to Alan for his presentation, I just mentioned a passport. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our 90 Days Around the World passport. So this is our virtual passport that you can get points for attending each event as part of our series. And those points will earn you the chance to win our Ultimate Home Bar sweepstakes. So that includes a $2,500 gift card to our stores and one-on-one time with Mark, who's here on the line, and Lisa or Chad from our wine team, so they can help you figure out the best items to buy for your own ultimate home bar. So for those of you already playing along, tonight's code word, I mentioned it earlier. I mentioned why Hendrick's and Glenfiddich are on here together tonight. They are both part of the William Grant & Sons company. So our code word tonight is Grant. So enter that into your app for 100 points tonight. And if you haven't downloaded the app to start playing it, go ahead and visit 90daysaroundtheworld.com to find out how to play. So now let's get another virtual stamp with Alan.
All right, yeah, thank you, Caroline. And it's nice to see Eric present. I used to live in New York City where we used to get to do this in person together. So it's like old times. So hello, everybody. My name is Alan Roth. I am the Glenfiddich ambassador on the West Coast of the U.S., based out in Los Angeles, and it's exciting to be connecting with you all. I miss fall, and I miss fall up in New England. So I'm very jealous of all the fun you guys are having up there with the season. So what I want to do is kick off with a little bit of background on Glenfiddich. Then we'll talk a little bit about tasting, and then we'll go on a little tour of the distillery itself. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen right here. And we're kicking off with this title page, which is actually quite relevant. So what we see here is a stag, because if your Scotch Gaelic is a little bit rusty, Glen means valley, Fiddick means deer. So Glen of the Fiddick, Valley of the Deer is the name of where Glenfiddich is made. And that is why the stag is our icon. To give you a little bit of centering, Glenfiddich is located in the Speyside region of Scotland, sort of a sub-region of the Highlands that is really rich with Scotch whiskey distilleries. There are a couple other countries there, but they're not super relevant. We're just really going to focus on everything from Glasgow on up. And to dial this in a little bit more, this is what I meant by a very rich region in distilleries. Speyside was where the railroad first came through when Scotland was going through the Industrial Revolution, and with that, a great way to bring barley in and out of the region. It is rife with incredible water sources, and also lots of glens, lots of valleys. Obviously, only one Valley of the Deer, but those valleys were really convenient places to hide out from the whiskey taxman. And so we had a ton of whiskey distilleries there. And one thing I always like to talk about with Glenfiddich is that we are still family owned and operated. We see here the major, Mr. William Grant himself, and his wife Elizabeth, who together with their 7 sons and 2 daughters built the distillery really themselves by hand. A lot of Scotch whiskey distilleries out there were started by men of means, or by families of means, and it was sort of kind of the same thing as a tech billionaire kind of buying a sports franchise these days. But William Grant was a guy that very much a blue collar guy who grew up in Dufftown. He was trained as a cobbler. He worked at and eventually ran another distillery in Dufftown for 20 years before the family had saved up the princely sum of 800 pounds with which they bought a set of secondhand stills and the site in Dufftown where the whiskey is still made to this day. And this family owned and operated distillery has seen quite a bit of success since the first drops ran off the stills on Christmas Day, 1887. And we were the first to export single malt as single malt outside of Scotland. So if you were drinking Scotch whiskey back in the early 1960s or before, you would have been drinking a blended Scotch, which is great, a great product in and of itself, and making it as its own craft. But the great thing about single malt is the single means that all of the whiskey is from one distillery, and all of the whiskey is made from malted barley in copper pot stills and made by hand. And just here is a little kind of sample of all but the most recent bottle that we have. And I have back here, oh, it's just out of reach. The most recent bottle that we have of Glenfiddich, and what you should probably see coming from the stores these days. And so, pardon me, I'm getting all my wires crossed. And so, we're just really, really proud to have been the ones to bring this spirit really to the world. And if you were, drinking single malt in 1963, there was just one. By the early 70s, there were about a dozen, and now there are literally hundreds available in the world. And with that, I'm going to break us out of the screen share for just a moment and just talk very, very quickly about tasting. So I have some Glenfiddich here in my Glencairn glass. And the first thing I like to do when I'm sipping on Glenfiddich is I like to hold the whiskey up to the light. I like to look at it very, very lovingly, with a lot of care, and just start nodding my head very slowly, very seriously. And I like to continue doing that until the people around me are appropriately intimidated, and that I am the whiskey expert in the room. Works sometimes, doesn't work other times, but it's always a good look if you get that light through the golden amber. But in reality, there's not a lot that you can tell about a whiskey by looking at it that you can't tell by nosing and tasting it. And so I like to use a Glencairn glass. I find white wine glasses are a great way to really focus on the aromas and flavors of a Scotch whiskey, though when I'm enjoying just for the sake of enjoyment, I'm using a rocks glass or a tumbler. And in the case of Glenfiddich, I'm just kind of nosing very lightly. If putting your nose into the glass is giving you too much of the alcohol component, you can just very slowly raise the glass to your nose and stop where the aromas start to register, or you can put your nose into the glass, but breathe in through your mouth. You'll get almost all of the flavor, but very little of the alcohol. I like to call it the filtered cigarette method. But in this case, this is the Glenfiddich 12 year. I'm getting some classic notes of Glenfiddich 12, fresh pear, a little bit of lemon zest, and just kind of a creamy spice in there. And then I always like to take 2 sips, the first to sort of kind of acclimate my palate to what I'm drinking, and then the second to really concentrate on the flavor. And in this case, what we like to say is the mouth follows the nose. The whiskey very much tastes like it smells, with this kind of a nice creamy finish on there, and really center of the bullseye for representing the Speyside single malt Scotch whiskey style. And with that, I am going to share my screen again, and we will take a little tour of the distillery itself and see how this whiskey is made. I'm gonna pop out of here if I can. Pardon me, this is top secret information, passcode protected. So give me 1 second to log in here. And this should be bringing us into there's a little bucolic scene. And what we're seeing here is the Robbie Dew spring. So all the water that Glenfiddich is made with, from the mashing to the fermentation to the bottling, will be made with Robbie Dew spring water. And with that, we're actually going to pop into the distillery itself. So here is our little distillery. There's a nice kind of railroad that comes behind. It is a balmy 8 degrees centigrade in Scotland. Eric, if you can kind of translate that in the chat for me. I just know it's not warm, but it is lovely. And this really is what it looks like when you go. And with that, I'm just going to bring you into where we start the journey with Glenfiddich. So here we are going to go into see our mash tuns, where the starches and the barley grains are converted into sugar, and then we will go into see the mash tuns where the actual fermentation happens. So we currently have 2 mash tuns, pretty much operating around the clock. And here we use 3 different waters at increasingly warm temperatures. And what those do is they activate these enzymes in the barley that start converting the starches in the grain into sugar. Super important, because yeast, we love it. It gives us alcohol. But those yeast need to eat sugar rather than starch. And so we have to help that process along. And it usually takes us between 6 and 8 hours to get all of that extraction. And one of the nice things about working with barley is when we drain the liquid out of there, a liquid that we call wort, W-O-R-T, the husks of the barley grains actually provide a nice little filter on the bed of the mash tun. So we drain through there and get a very sweet, kind of sugary, almost barley tea that we then bring over into this next area of the distillery, where they go into mash tuns made from Oregon pine, or Douglas fir, if you prefer. And when you see, you're only going to see about 6 feet, some measurements there on how those current fermentations are going. We're only going to see maybe about 4 feet of the mash tuns but the mashman there is actually walking on a false floor, and those go down about another 18 feet below. And one of the reasons that we do it this way is so that we can access the mash tuns as the fermentation is going on. And the other is that as the yeast are fermenting, it produces carbon dioxide, which will fall through that false floor and keep everything safe for the mashman. Now, we ferment for 72 hours at Glenfiddich. It's about 24 hours longer than we need to create the strong distiller's beer of about 12% alcohol, which we call wash. And the reason we go the extra 24 hours is it helps us develop the fruity esters that Glenfiddich is known for. Those notes of fresh pear that I mentioned, the lemon zest, and even in the beginning, before we start aging it in the casks, we get these nice notes of fresh cut grass that then develop in the process. So we've created this beer, or this wash, and so the next step is to distill it. And alcohol, wonderful in all of its most of its properties, I should say, certainly in moderation, all of its properties. And one of the nice things about it is that if we heat it gently, it will evaporate at a lower temperature than water will. So we can take that wash, and through 2 distillations, one following the other, we end up being able to concentrate both the alcohol and the specific flavors that we're really looking for. So this is one of our still houses at Glenfiddich. The unadorned stills without any sort of shape in them, these are our wash stills, and they convert that wash to about 24% alcohol. So they just about double it there into what we call a low wines. Now at Glenfiddich, our stills work in trios. So one wash still will feed 2 spirit stills, the one with the boil bulb here and the other with the lamp glass. And when we're doing that second distillation, it's a very slow, gentle distillation where we only take a high, narrow cut. So what do I mean by a high, narrow cut? We're just taking really the purest part of the distillate, the one that's going to capture those beautiful fruit flavors that we're looking for. And one of the other reasons that we really have to run our still so slowly is because of what's going on inside of the still. So as we heat the liquid and the vapor rises, it's going to come into contact with the sides of the still, and especially on the very top, the arm that goes out to the condenser. And we'll see that in just a second. That's called the line arm. And as the vapor hits the copper, it has a reaction, condenses, drops back into the liquid, and through that process becomes a little bit lighter in nature. And we see some of that condensing and kind of rolling back into the still right there. It creates this beautiful liquid that we want. And so right now we're gonna kind of see the other side of that process. After the liquid is condensed, it goes into what we call a spirit safe. And the spirit safe is where we say, yes, we're going to take that liquid and turn it into whiskey. Now in each of these, we're going to see 2 spouts. Each spout is representing one of those 2 different shaped spirit stills. And when they are turned into that middle chamber, that is when we are taking the whiskey, or I should say the spirit, the new make spirit, to turn into whiskey. And what the stillman is doing right here is checking to make sure that the alcohol percentage is exactly what he wants, because it is that percentage that tells us when we want to start and stop taking the cut off of those stills. So for those of you who have the Glenfiddich, 12-year, or have been sipping on it, it's really kind of those 2 parts that really create that distillery character it's well known for. It is about 85% aged in American oak casks, about 15% in European sherry casks from Jerez. And it is certainly the Glenfiddich that most people know. However, I believe that some people may have, or we have certainly a trio pack of 200 milliliter bottles that includes the Glenfiddich 15-year Solera Reserve, and that is made right in this building right here. So all the distillation is exactly the same. When it comes off of the still, that drop of new make spirit could become any type of Glenfiddich. But once it goes into barrel, then it's going to start to narrow its paths a little bit. And so my friend Mike Dawson is going to take us into warehouse 8 right here. You don't have to be Mike Dawson size to move the casks around at Glenfiddich, but it's not a bad idea. They are heavy. Even just the hogsheads or the American standard barrels, to his right are about 500 pounds, and the sherry casks just to his left are about twice that. So Mike is walking in front of the Solera vat, where each batch of the Glenfiddich 15 has been married since we started making it in 1998. And it is a combination of 3 different types of casks. And I'm going to pull them up right here. And we're going to see this process. So this is a sherry butt. About a third of what we see in the Solera vat is coming from those sherry butts. And then almost 2/3 is coming from used bourbon barrels, like in the middle, and just to the right, to Mike's left, is some Glenfiddich that has been aged in new toasted American oak. The first time that Glenfiddich has ever seen new American oak would have been back in 1998. Now, you notice there's already liquid in the Solera vat, and that's very important because the Solera vat has remained at least half full since we first started making this whiskey back in 1998. And so over time, as we continue to marry in that Solera vat, it means that what you have in any glass of Glenfiddich 15-year Solera Reserve is not just the most recent batch of the Glenfiddich 15, but actually a little bit of every batch that we have ever made. So it gives just an incredible complexity, and the only single malt Scotch whiskey of 15 years or older in the top 10 best selling in the world. Something that we are very, very proud of. And for those of you who like those rich sherried whiskeys, this is one for you. I always hate to leave the warehouse 8 where the Solera vat is. You're not allowed to dip into the Solera vat, and I've definitely never done that. So we'll just have to go. I'll just have to tear myself away. But it is a wonderful, wonderful place to be. And let's see, I've got about 10 minutes. I'm gonna take a little risk here, and I'm gonna bring us into a warehouse 6, which is really important because there's something else that we do at Glenfiddich that's quite special. Which is that we marry all of our whiskey in 2,000 liter tons in order to let the whiskey get to know its new friends, the other casks that were mingled together, in order to just help it kind of integrate before we bring it out into the world. And let's see if we're walking by the right, if we're in the right spot. Sometimes I get turned around. It's all these buildings, they look the same, but this is exactly the right one. And Mike is walking through a bunch of 2,000 liter marrying tuns made from Portuguese oak. In the 1960s, when the master distiller, the malt master, wanted to start going down this road, he asked the family that owns Glenfiddich if they would purchase these marrying tuns. They said, we'll do one better, we'll have them made for you. And the family then went and bought a forest in Portugal to have these made, and really just shows the kind of decisions you can make and how quickly they can be made when you are family owned and operated. I just wanted to give you all a chance to see those marrying tons. Some monkey shoulder is actually married in that room as well. And the last place I wanted to take you, especially because it relates to the Glenfiddich 18-year, which you would have in that trio pack, though I personally recommend buying a full bottle of this one. It is absolutely one of my favorites. The 18-year is about 80% American oak, about 20% sherry cask or ex-European oak, and you can really taste it. And the coopers that build and repair casks at Glenfiddich, including our master cooper here, recently retired actually, Ian McDonald, are the ones who are responsible for a lot of the big flavor in there. And we're going to see that in the cask that Ian is about to work on right now, which is not the one that we see right there, but what he's about to roll over, which is called a distillery puncheon. A distillery puncheon is actually made from American oak staves that used to be built into a 53-gallon barrel to age bourbon or Tennessee whiskey here in the US. But then we took it apart. Now, normally when you rebuild American staves, you create something called a hogshead, which is going to add, maybe about 10% of additional capacity, maybe 20. But in this case, they rebuilt it into basically the largest size that American oak staves become, which is the distillery puncheon, a style that we pioneered at Glenfiddich. It is about as tall as it is wide, which is how I feel like I'm getting sometimes when I'm doing my quarantine snacks, but you know, working on that. In this 500-liter barrel, it creates kind of minimal surface area to maximum volume, which helps create a really beautiful, spicy flavor in there. And actually, if we look there, we just kind of, it was out of the frame, but that X actually is why Ian is working on this barrel. So after the guys are at the filling center are dumping the casks, which actually would have happened in the same room as the Solera reserve is made, so in warehouse 8. If they see a problem, they're going to mark a section of the cask with an X, and that means that Ian and his associates down at the cooperage are going to need to replace that stave. There might have been a weak link. They might have seen some dripping going on. And Ian's job is then to find a stave that fits perfectly. I have a feeling he had that one set aside for the video that they were doing. But it honestly wouldn't have taken him much longer. Ian, even at retirement, was the fastest cooper at the distillery. Ian clocks in at about, I would say, 5'3". Sometimes we call him the Mini Cooper, but he always reminds us that he's the Mini Cooper-esque because of how fast he is in the process there. And if you just want to see just one, let me make sure I'm doing okay on time. I think I'm good. This is like a slightly sped up version, but in reality, it's not speeding up by that much. Here, he's actually putting together either a hogshead or an American Standard barrel. And one of the things that always blows my mind, whether it's at Glenfiddich's cooperage or any other, the coopers are basically using the same tools that were used to build barrels in ancient Egypt. And the technology hasn't really changed all that much. It's an ancient skill, and the guilds that they are a member of are ancient themselves. I do know that when we need to toast the top of a barrel, we may or may not use something that resembles a pizza oven. So that may be a little bit new, you know, probably not what you were going to find in Cleopatra's Egypt, but about as traditional as it can be, from the aprons to the staves to the hoops. And with that, I'm going to take us out of the screen share, and just see if there were any questions that might have come up while we were immersed in the Glenfiddich distillery itself.
Yeah, definitely. So there's one question that I'm going to pull up a visual aid for, but while I pull that up, Alan, somebody on Facebook wants to know if you can tell us a little bit about Monkey Shoulder, and how does that blend compare to some of the other ones the other scotches that you were talking about tonight?
It's a great question. So Monkey Shoulder, which my beautiful model is demonstrating on the screen there, is a blend of 3 Speyside malts. So whereas most blended Scotch whiskey is going to be usually majority grain whiskey, which is distilled in a column still, this is all originally single malt Scotch whiskey, 3 different ones combined together, named after the repetitive stress injury that our malt men used to have. They used to always be turning the barley as they were malting it, and then it would go cool off by a window and eventually developed a little bit of a hunch. And while we certainly make sure they don't have to experience that these days, we did want to tribute their hard work and their sacrifice through Monkey Shoulder. In terms of flavor, it shares quite a bit in common with Glenfiddich, but to me, I get a lot more like orange citrus peel on it. It is a beautiful Scotch whiskey for making cocktails, frankly. We really enjoy whiskey sours, penicillins, absolutely spectacular in cocktails.
Perfect. And then somebody else on Facebook asked if there was a variety pack available of the scotches that you were tasting, and Christopher literally was emailing me during this with a picture of a variety pack that's available. So that's what I want to pull. I'm going to pull up that picture because we literally have it right now for $49.99. So these are the 3 scotches that Alan was talking to us about. Mark, do you know if this pack is available statewide or at just specific stores?
Yeah, currently this is a one-time buy that we brought in for the holidays. It's retailing at currently at $49.99. We have 233 units. I looked it up the end of last week. So we're right around 230 units out in stores. So again, go to liquorandwineoutlets.com, type in Glenfiddich, and as you scroll through, there'll be a picture of that pack there. You click on it, it'll tell you exactly which stores have it. And it's a great gift for somebody for the holidays. You know, if you know somebody that likes single malt and you're not sure what to get them, I mean, this is perfect for that.
And to the person who asked that on Facebook, it's like you were in our minds because we were literally going back and forth via email with that picture when you asked that question. So great timing. Couple more questions for you, Alan. Let's see here. How does the American oak add to flavor that makes it such a key element in the process?
That's a great question. So, I mean, oak in general is this amazing wood because it is, impervious to liquid. So it keeps all the whiskey that's in liquid form in the cask inside, but it's actually breathable. And so air comes in and out, and actually some alcohol escapes, sadly. We call that the angel share. But the oak is really important because it's full of lots of, kind of molecules that end up giving us just really, really beautiful flavor. And so the two main types of oak that we use are American oak, which is going to be a lot more, I would say, focused on like vanilla, light baking spices, and some people even get some coconut in there. It's not the number one flavor I get. And then European oak, which is much denser, both in flavor compounds and in just actual structure. We actually lose less angel share in European oak casks, but it gives kind of notes of like rich molasses, dried and baked fruits, Christmas cake, just really, really intense spice as well. And so, a lot of distillers are going to kind of find the right balance between the two of those. And so for us, the American oak is really important in two ways. One is obviously the flavors that the oak will contribute to the whiskey in it. All the barrels together do contribute about 70%. But really, for Glenfiddich especially, too much sherry cask is going to hide our distillery character, and we really want that to shine through. We worked very hard to develop the flavors, through that fermentation, through that distillation, and we want to make sure that that's what drinkers of Glenfiddich find. And so for us, the American oak is really important because it doesn't speak over the distillery character. So for us, it's very, very important that when you taste Glenfiddich, it's not just beautiful whiskey, but it's beautiful whiskey that can only be made at our distillery, right? Celebrating that single and the single malt, that it all comes from that one distillery.
Awesome. All right. So, I was just about to say we don't have any more questions, but then you guys asked another question. George would like to know, Alan, what your favorite product is, if you had to pick.
Yes. So, I do drink as much of the Glenfiddich 18-year as decorum will allow. But what I drink the most often actually is the Glenfiddich 14-year, the Bourbon Barrel Reserve, which is exclusive to the U.S. and Canada. I see that Mark is a fan, and that is aged entirely in used American oak and then finished in charred new oak casks. And I may actually share my screen one more time for this. And bring up the cooperage where these are made, if I can escape the, there we go. Where these casks are made by a family owned and operated cooperage called the Kelvin Cooperage, originally founded on the banks of the Kelvin River in Glasgow, but where the casks are now made for us to finish the Glenfiddich 14-year. And it's a really special place, and they only use oak scraps to fire the process here. So no accelerants that would be artificial. And they are making these barrels to Scottish standards, which are just a little bit more, I would say, pure than American barrel making standards. Not by a ton, but we really put the extra effort in there. And one of the important things is this barrel has actually already been toasted, which is what we see going on where the fire is behind. And the toasting is really important because we always talk about barrel char, and these are a 3.5 char. But it's the toasting that's important because the toasting is what helps turn the compounds in the oak into the flavors that we then taste in the whiskey. And so we actually have an extra long toast on these, a 20-minute toast before the barrels get charred. And we see the charring happening here. And the extra toast is what creates the beautiful vanilla brown sugar flavors that you get in the Glenfiddich 14-year, the Bourbon Barrel Reserve. And if you are a fan of bourbon or rye or Canadian whiskey, the Glenfiddich 14-year is going to be just really up your alley. I didn't know better. I started in the world of bourbon before I saw the light of single malt Scotch whiskey. And so the 14-year is a nice way for me to remember my past and celebrate my present as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alan. Looks like we've got a couple of attendees who are drinking a few of your scotches right now. We had a few people getting ready earlier. They had a little Hendrick's, we'll call it an appetizer, and now they've moved on to their scotches. It's great that everybody is so engaged with the presentation tonight. We really appreciate everybody coming out, attending our little virtual tasting and tour. Thank you so much to Alan and Eric for joining us. We had a great time. You guys were awesome. We were chatting before we went live, and Eric was actually in the town where I live around this time last year at one of the restaurants in town that I can walk to from my house. So I can't wait until you guys can come back to New Hampshire in real life and we can have real tastings together. Hopefully walking distance from my house. So thank you everybody for attending. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Tomorrow night, we are doing a little Italian wine tasting. So if you love wine, join us tomorrow night as well. It's going to be fun. And please be sure to visit 90daysaroundtheworld.com to find out about upcoming events. Download your virtual passport to earn points towards winning the ultimate home bar. And as always, please drink responsibly. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Caroline.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Mark.
Eric. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you,
Bye, Mark.
everyone.
Bye, Christopher. Bye, Patrick.
Caroline, you forgot the code word for tonight.
Very
Oh, the code word again is grant.
cucumber.
For those of
Oh,
you still working, not working, excuse me, for those of you still watching, code word grant. Thanks.